Derek Norwood pressed his hands to the steering wheel, the chill of the October evening seeping through his scrubs. Oak Ridge Road stretched ahead, its oak trees casting long shadows in the fading amber light. He had just finished a grueling 12-hour shift at St. Whitfield Memorial Hospital. His fingers itched to remove the gloves, but he knew the night was far from over. In Briarfield County, appearances were a currency, and he was always aware of how little his skin color mattered to the town. Suddenly, flashing red and blue lights lit up his rearview mirror. A familiar dread settled in his chest. Chief Gerald Holt's cruiser had stopped him, and Derek already knew this would not be routine. He slowly pulled over, keeping his hands visible, following the lesson his father had drilled into him since he was 16. Stay alive first, be angry later. Officer Craig Dawson approached, jaw tight, flashlight beam cutting into Derek's eyes. "License and registration," he said, and Derek handed them over without a word. Holt arrived shortly after, his presence commanding, boots crunching gravel with a practiced authority. He circled the car, eyes on Derek, dismissing the hospital lanyard around his neck as if it were worthless. Holt's words were deliberate, cruel, insinuating theft where there was only life-saving equipment. Despite Derek's calm, his own body registering the cold of the hood beneath his palms, he understood the power Holt wielded in this town. Silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the distant hum of the city and the soft rustle of leaves. Dawson twisted Derek's wrists behind his back, snapping handcuffs into place. As he was led away, Derek's phone buzzed repeatedly in his pocket, each vibration a heartbeat signaling urgency. At the hospital, Dr. Amanda West, the attending ER physician, was fighting against the clock. Patricia Holt had collapsed with a torn aortic valve requiring immediate surgery. And the only surgeon capable of saving her life was now in police custody. A dark irony heavy in the autumn air. Derek sat in the holding cell, hands on his knees, spine straight, eyes forward, listening to Holt's lingering words of contempt. Time passed with agonizing slowness, each second a reminder of the injustice, yet Derek remained poised, his mind disciplined, preparing for the task ahead, unaware that his intervention would soon be the difference between life and death. Outside, the night held its breath, the oaks silent witnesses to the unfolding moral reckoning that would soon shake Briarfield to its core. 6 hours earlier, Derek Norwood had been immersed in the controlled chaos of Operating Room 3. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead as he focused on the exposed chest cavity of a 17-year-old boy from a car accident. Blood pooled, ribs shattered, and a punctured lung struggled for air. His hands moved with decades of training, precise and steady. "Suction," he instructed, voice calm and unwavering. The nurse responded immediately, clearing blood with practiced efficiency. Each motion, each stitch was deliberate, the kind of precision that only comes from over 4,000 surgeries. When the monitors finally stabilized, the boy's chest rising on its own, Derek exhaled lightly. Another life saved. The day had begun with an 81-year-old man whose aorta had ruptured. Derek had repaired it before breakfast. Chief of surgery at St. Whitfield Memorial Hospital. 22 years of experience, renowned for complex operations. Outside the OR, none of that mattered in Briarfield County. Perfect lawns and oak-lined streets masked the undercurrent of exclusion and suspicion. Derek, one of the few black residents, had felt the watchful eyes of neighbors, subtle discrimination at the store, cold greetings that never came. His drive home had always been a study in caution, the dark blue Tahoe, classical music playing softly, eyes vigilant. Holt had been waiting. An 18-year tenure as police chief had made him untouchable. Derek's car slowed as he noticed the cruiser's flashing lights. His stomach tightened, not from fear, but from the anticipation of a scene he had seen before. Officer Dawson approached with a rigid stance, flashlight cutting through the dusk. Holt emerged, inspecting Derek as one inspects a stain on a floor. The lanyard was flicked from his neck, instruments treated as potential crime evidence. Derek remained silent, steady. Neighboring houses watched from porches. A teenager filmed it all on his phone, unaware of the consequences the video would soon ignite. Derek's phone buzzed continuously, missed calls piling up. Inside the ER, a patient's life hung in the balance, each ring a signal he could not heed. In the holding cell, Derek seated himself, maintaining composure, hands on knees, eyes forward. He breathed evenly, a calm center amidst the chaos. Unbeknownst to Holt, cameras recorded every word, every expression. And in the hospital, Dr. West worked furiously, stabilizing Patricia Holt, the chief's wife, knowing that only Derek could perform the surgery necessary to save her life. The night in Briarfield County was poised on a knife's edge, a collision of prejudice, authority, and the immutable call to save life. By 7:10 p.m., Derek had been cuffed, sitting on the cold metal bench of the Briarfield County Police Station, the walls scratched with years of graffiti. The fluorescent lights above made his skin look pale, his scrubs clinging uncomfortably to his damp body. He remained composed, though, hands resting lightly on his knees, mind running through every step of tonight's events and the surgical cases he had just handled. Chief Holt entered with a cup of coffee, still carrying the bag of surgical instruments Derek had packed for his patients. He set them down with the air of someone presenting contraband, and his voice laced with derision. Derek's eyes didn't waver. He studied the cell wall, calculating, steady, patient. Holt spoke again, questioning the ownership of the tools, dismissing the hospital lanyard and ID as meaningless, challenging Derek's integrity with the casual cruelty of someone used to unchecked power. Each word landed like a weight on the room. But Derek remained immovable, the calm of a man who knew the stakes and refused to let fear control him. Meanwhile, in the hospital, Dr. Amanda West fought to stabilize Patricia Holt. Every second mattered. Each minute Derek remained detained, the window for saving her life narrowed. Staff moved with precise urgency, setting up for the complex cardiac surgery only Derek could perform. The contrast between the cold, bureaucratic rigidity of the police station and the frantic, life-saving rhythm of the ER could not have been starker. Derek's phone continued to vibrate, unseen in his pocket. Messages of urgency piled up, highlighting the cruel irony that he was being punished for simply being present to serve. Officer Tonya Moore watched from the sidelines, body cam recording, her eyes registering unease at the unfolding injustice. Outside, the suburban street held its breath. Neighbors observed quietly, the video on the teenager's phone capturing the tableau of authority and defiance that would soon explode online. Derek's thoughts stayed fixed on the task ahead. Surgery, life, precision, control, the hum of the fluorescent lights, the distant sounds of traffic, the low murmur of officers conversing, all faded into a backdrop for his mental preparation. When the moment came, his resolve would carry him from this cage to the operating room, where skill and calm would confront chaos, and the consequences of prejudice would meet the immovable force of duty. The tension in the station was palpable, but Derek's steady gaze foretold a turning point yet to come, a moment where life and justice would collide, reshaping the town, and perhaps the nation, forever. Inside the holding cell, Derek Norwood remained a study in quiet determination. The metal bench was hard and unforgiving, yet he maintained his posture, hands resting lightly on his knees. Each second he sat there measured against the ticking clock of Patricia Holt's life. In the emergency room at St. Whitfield Memorial, Dr. West barked instructions, moving with surgical precision, stabilizing the chief of police's wife. Monitors beeped erratically, the rhythm of urgency echoing through the hospital corridors. Derek's thoughts were precise, his mind running through the surgical steps even as he was confined. Officer Moore lingered nearby, her body cam capturing every moment, her expression shifting from professional detachment to uneasy acknowledgement of injustice. Outside, autumn leaves drifted across Oak Ridge Road, the suburban quiet masking the storm of events unfolding. Derek had already endured a traffic stop laced with prejudice, handcuffed and publicly humiliated, yet he remained unbroken. Holt's voice had faded into the hallway, his words of contempt echoing faintly against the walls. A backdrop to Derek's focus. Somewhere in his mind, he calculated the distance to the hospital, the critical minutes lost, the steps needed to save a life that depended solely on his skill. He reviewed every incision, every suture pattern, every critical maneuver required for a torn aortic valve repair. The juxtaposition was unbearable. A man's life in jeopardy, and yet he was immobilized by arbitrary authority. Each vibration of his unseen phone was a drumbeat of urgency, reminders that the window for action was narrowing. Derek's breathing remained even. each inhalation and exhalation a methodical preparation, a silent promise that when released, he would bring every ounce of his training to bear. In that holding cell, time slowed, stretching every moment into a meticulous rehearsal of focus and skill, a mental map of the coming battle in the OR. The room's fluorescent hum, the distant sounds of officers moving through the station, and the faint echoes from outside were all part of the backdrop for his mental orchestration. The stage was set, injustice on one side, life hanging in the balance on the other. Derek's calm, his patience, and his commitment to saving life formed a quiet resistance, a tension that promised an imminent collision between duty, morality, and authority. Holt's shadow had receded down the hallway, leaving Derek alone to sit in the holding cell, yet the weight of what had just transpired clung to him. Each second stretched, the fluorescent lights above flickering faintly, highlighting the scratches and worn surfaces around him. He thought of the patient in the ER, Patricia Holt, a woman whose life now balanced precariously on the edge of minutes and millimeters. In his mind, he ran through the surgical procedure for repairing an ascending aortic dissection, visualizing each suture, each graft placement, the precise control needed to navigate the swollen, fragile vessel. Officer Moore had moved to her cruiser but kept the body cam recording, the evidence of injustice quietly accumulating, waiting to speak. In the hospital, Dr. West stabilized the monitors, her team following protocol, but each step was a desperate countdown to Derek's release. Meanwhile, the suburban street outside remained deceptively calm. Neighbors oblivious to the storm of lives intersecting just beyond their windows. Derek's hands pressed lightly against his knees, fingers feeling the coolness of the metal bench, grounding himself in the discipline that would soon guide him through life and death decisions. Every fiber of his being held focus, a mental rehearsal of the intricate surgical steps he would execute once freed. The irony pressed in, authority wielded to control him, had unknowingly created a scenario demanding every ounce of his expertise. As the minutes ticked by, the tension expanded, not just in the police station, but across the town and in the minds of those watching, recording, waiting. Derek remained still, composed, calm in the eye of the storm, every thought aligned toward a single objective: preserving life when given the chance. Outside, the amber dusk had fully faded, leaving only the cold night, quiet yet filled with expectation, as if the town itself held its breath for what was about to come. At St. Whitfield Memorial, the ER team worked in unison, every action measured against the relentless clock. Patricia Holt's monitors spiked and dipped, each variation demanding precise intervention. Dr. West issued commands with the authority of experience, stabilizing lines, adjusting medication, and communicating with the cardiothoracic team, readying the OR. Every second Derek remained detained was a potential compromise to the delicate equilibrium sustaining her life. In the holding cell, Derek's mind moved ahead, mapping out each incision, anticipating the fragile points of the aortic wall, rehearsing graft placements, imagining the rhythm of the bypass machine. He sat calm, breathing methodically, as if each breath infused him with the focus necessary for the task awaiting. Officer Moore, fully aware of the unjust circumstances, documented every moment, her silent presence an ally to justice. Outside, the autumn night deepened, the streets empty, the houses darkened, unaware witnesses to the unfolding drama. Holt's hubris had inadvertently created a scenario where his authority would be challenged not by legal channels, but by the immutable laws of life and death. Derek's composure did not waver. His training, discipline, and moral obligation formed a steady current beneath the chaos. Each vibration of his pocket, ignored yet felt, reminded him of urgency. Yet he remained unmoved, visualizing the operating table, the instruments, the precise dance of survival. The tension in the station was palpable, a heavy atmosphere that contrasted sharply with the surgical theater's controlled chaos. Time, for Derek, had become both enemy and ally, stretching seconds into minutes. Each one a rehearsal, a preparation, a promise to the life he was sworn to protect. The stage was set. Soon he would move from confinement to command, transforming restraint into action, injustice into the meticulous art of saving a human life. The hallway outside the holding cell echoed with Holt's retreating boots. But Derek's focus never wavered. He sat on the cold bench, visualizing the OR, the sterile instruments, the heart-lung bypass machine humming, ready for the precise coordination it demanded. In his mind, he traced the steps for the aortic repair, where to place the first suture, how to stabilize the ascending aorta, the exact tension needed for each graft. Officer Moore's body blinked softly in the background, documenting the quiet persistence of injustice. Back at the hospital, Dr. West coordinated with the surgical team, prepping Patricia Holt for the procedure only Derek could perform. Monitors fluctuated with dangerous variability, each second pushing the patient closer to irreversibility. Derek's cell phone vibrated again, ignored but felt, each missed call a tether to a life depending solely on him. Outside, the neighborhood remained calm, unaware of the moral and medical storm unfolding in the station. Derek's mind moved faster than the minutes passing, rehearsing movements, visualizing outcomes, mentally mapping contingencies. He felt the cold steel beneath his palms, the hum of fluorescent lights above, the distant conversations of officers, all a backdrop to the precise focus required to save a life. Holt's earlier contempt had inadvertently forced the scenario that would test Derek's skills under pressure beyond the OR. Patience, strategy, and moral clarity. Each moment of enforced stillness reinforced his determination, sharpening his resolve to act when freed. Time stretched, dense with tension, until the imminent release would transform restraint into action, injustice into life-saving precision. Derek remained the calm center, ready to move from a cell of authority's arrogance into the operating room where skill, focus, and moral duty would collide against the tide of mortality. By 8:14 p.m., James Whitfield III arrived at the Briarfield police station. His black Mercedes parked boldly in front of the main entrance, signaling authority without haste. Calm, precise, he walked through the doors, commanding recognition. The desk officer stammered, recognizing the hospital board chairman instantly. Whitfield demanded Chief Holt and was met with the usual smirk that began to falter as reality set in. The words he spoke pierced the air. Derek Norwood, the county's only surgeon qualified for emergency cardiothoracic repair, was being held in custody while Holt's wife's life hung in the balance. Holt's confident facade crumbled instantly, coffee trembling in his hand, words failing him. He sprinted down the hallway, boots echoing urgency, keying into the cell where Derek sat composed, hands on his knees, eyes forward. Derek rose calmly, adjusted his scrubs, and walked past Holt, unflinching, a man of duty above petty humiliation. Whitfield handed Derek his car keys, ensuring the fastest transport to the hospital. Derek's mind was already moving through the procedure, instruments, grafts, and sutures rehearsed in advance. As the Mercedes sped toward St. Whitfield Memorial, Derek prepared mentally for the precise orchestration of life-saving skill required. Each intersection, each turn brought him closer to the OR, where the fragile rhythm of a life teetered. Outside, the suburban night was still, leaves drifting across Oak Ridge Road, the road that had witnessed injustice now becoming the conduit to salvation. Derek's focus was absolute. The moral weight of the preceding hours transformed into disciplined action, every thought and motion aligned to restore life where authority had nearly failed. The town's tension remained unbroken, but within the car a convergence of skill, duty, and urgency was about to challenge the bounds of human precision. The Mercedes pulled into St. Whitfield Memorial Hospital at 8:31 p.m. Derek leapt from the car before it fully stopped, pushing through the automatic doors with urgency, already half running toward the OR. The surgical team was prepared. 2 nurses, an anesthesiologist, a perfusionist by the heart-lung bypass machine. Dr. West met him in the hallway, clipboard in hand, tension etched on her face. She's crashing again, 3rd time in 20 minutes, maybe 30 before the dissection is irreversible. Derek nodded without hesitation. Blood type? O positive, 6 units standing by. Imaging was on the screen, the ascending aorta, swollen and fragile. Derek pulled on his gloves, adjusted his headlamp, and entered OR1. Patricia Holt lay anesthetized, monitors beeping erratically. The bypass machine hummed beside her, ready to support the failing heart. Derek moved with surgical precision, orchestrating the delicate repair of the aortic tear. Sutures, grafts, and patches were placed with unwavering focus. Time was measured in heartbeats, every move critical. The room was silent, alive only with the rhythm of machines and the occasional instruction from Derek. 3 hours and 14 minutes passed, every second a test of skill, patience, and nerve. At 11:45 p.m., he completed the final suture, stepping back to observe the monitors. Heart rhythm stabilized. She was alive. Derek removed his gloves, walked from the OR without ceremony. In the waiting room, Holt sat slouched, defeated, officers Dawson and Moore beside him. Derek's face showed nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, only exhaustion. Holt rose unsteadily. "Your wife is stable," Derek said simply. Holt exhaled, overwhelmed, words failing him. Derek continued, calm, deliberate. "2 hours ago, you put me on my knees, called me a thief, told me I didn't belong. You may want to call your attorney before you speak further." Without another glance, he walked down the hallway, leaving Holt to confront his own arrogance. Officer Moore stepped forward quietly, ensuring body cam footage was preserved. Justice had begun its slow, inevitable course. The next morning, the video from the teenager's phone had gone viral. The grainy footage of Derek in scrubs, handcuffed on Oak Ridge Road, had exploded across social media. Within 12 hours, it reached over 60,000 views. By sunrise, it surpassed 200,000. Local news picked it up, with Channel 4 Briarfield broadcasting the story. Local surgeon detained during routine traffic stop. Attorney Denise Collins, seeing the injustice unfold, immediately moved to take the case. By mid-morning, she had obtained body cam footage from Officer Moore, unedited and comprehensive. The recordings exposed Holt's contemptuous treatment. The lanyard flicked off, instruments labeled as burglary tools, words dripping with casual cruelty. The holding cell footage captured 9 minutes and 42 seconds of Holt delivering his monologue of racial prejudice, stating, "People like you don't belong here." Collins held a press conference at 4:00 p.m., standing on the courthouse steps, the microphones reflecting the afternoon sun. She played select footage, allowing it to speak volumes. Her words were precise. Derek Norwood, chief of surgery, had been subjected to unlawful arrest and racial abuse while performing his duty. Within hours, national outlets picked up the story. CNN, MSNBC, Fox, ABC, all ran the footage. The hashtag #FreeDerekNorwood trended across platforms, igniting a national conversation about racial profiling, abuse of power, and systemic injustice. Derek remained calm, quietly processing the unfolding public reckoning, aware that the viral exposure was a pivotal turning point in the long arc of accountability awaiting the Briarfield Police Department. This moment marked the beginning of widespread scrutiny, legal action, and societal reflection on authority, bias, and the moral obligations of those entrusted with power. Within hours, the pressure on Chief Holt intensified. Mayor Brenda Sullivan initially released a statement supporting the police department and its internal review process, but public outcry mounted. By 6:00 p.m., after Collins' press conference and the viral spread of body cam and holding cell footage, Sullivan called for an independent investigation into the Briarfield Police Department. The county sheriff's office assumed responsibility, and within a week, the state attorney general launched a parallel civil rights inquiry. Investigators uncovered 14 prior traffic stops involving black drivers initiated by Holt or Dawson in the past year, none resulting in charges. Documentation was incomplete or missing, revealing systemic abuse of authority. Holt's prior internal emails surfaced, directing patrols to monitor newcomers who did not fit the town's demographic profile. Federal authorities indicted Holt on false imprisonment, civil rights violations, and abuse of power. The trial lasted 4 days, with the jury deliberating less than 3 hours. Holt was convicted on all counts, sentenced to 30 months in federal prison, banned from law enforcement, and stripped of his pension. Dawson was terminated and sentenced to 18 months, partially suspended with mandatory retraining. Collins denounced the sentence as insufficient, though it marked a turning point. Derek's legal journey continued with a federal civil rights lawsuit against Briarfield County, ultimately settling for $4.8 million. Derek then held a press conference of his own. A simple podium, navy suit, no notes. He announced the establishment of the Norwood Justice Initiative, a legal defense fund supporting victims of racial profiling who lacked resources. The message was clear. His experience would empower others, transforming personal injustice into systemic advocacy. Officer Tonya Moore, the one who had quietly observed and preserved evidence, was promoted to lieutenant and later transferred to the State Police Academy, where she now instructs cadets on true public service. The ripples of that October night began reshaping Briarfield County's law enforcement, accountability, and community awareness. 1 year later, Briarfield County had changed in ways subtle yet profound. The lawns, the oak trees, and the freshly painted fences remained, but beneath the surface, the culture of oversight and accountability had shifted. The Briarfield Police Department appointed its first chief from outside the county, and a civilian oversight board now reviewed every use of force report, traffic stop, and complaint monthly. Meetings were open to the public, and residents began attending, ensuring transparency. Derek Norwood still drove his dark blue Chevy Tahoe, classical music playing softly, lanyard hanging from the rearview mirror. He continued to observe the speed limit on Oak Ridge Road, a habit of caution learned from his father. Derek also joined the county's civilian oversight board, not to relive trauma, but to prevent it from occurring to others. He spoke at medical schools, discussing race, service, and the moral obligations of those who take oaths to preserve life. His presence reminded communities that the call to serve transcends personal affronts. Patricia Holt had made a full recovery after weeks of rehabilitation and months of cardiac therapy. She sent Derek a handwritten letter of gratitude, 3 pages long, contents private. Derek and she never crossed paths again, yet the impact of his actions remained indelible. Holt served his sentence in a federal facility, relocated afterward, his reputation a cautionary tale. Dawson left law enforcement entirely, quietly building a life elsewhere. Moore, now lieutenant, trains cadets in the meaning of protect and serve, showing the first 30 seconds of her body cam footage as a stark lesson. Whitfield implemented a permanent diversity and equity initiative in the hospital, funding underrepresented medical students through the Norwood Fellowship. The Norwood Justice Initiative, fueled by Derek's settlement, undertook dozens of cases in its first year, effecting change far beyond one man's experience. The ripple of a single act of courage and skill reshaped systems, communities, and lives, proving that steadfast integrity can endure, outlasting injustice and prejudice. Derek Norwood's life returned to a quieter rhythm. But the echoes of that October night lingered. He continued his work as chief of surgery at St. Whitfield Memorial, saving lives with the same precision and calm he had demonstrated in crisis. His advocacy extended beyond the OR, influencing policies, mentoring young surgeons, and speaking on the intersection of race and service. The community had begun to acknowledge systemic flaws, with increased oversight and engagement from residents, holding the police accountable in ways previously unimaginable. Officer Moore's training programs reshaped incoming cadets' understanding of duty and justice, embedding lessons learned from that night into the culture of the state police. The Norwood Justice Initiative supported those without privilege, ensuring that legal protection and advocacy were accessible to all, demonstrating that systemic change is achievable when action is grounded in courage and principle. Derek's own habits, driving cautiously, classical music in the car, lanyard in place, remained. Reminders of vigilance and personal discipline, symbols of both survival and resilience. Communities watched, learned, and slowly began to shift, understanding that standing firm against injustice can create ripples far beyond a single incident. Derek himself reflected on the moral weight of action, realizing that while personal endurance mattered, the real impact lay in institutional change, mentorship, and protection of life and rights for the marginalized. The town's surface appearance remained familiar, but beneath it, the seeds of accountability, education, and equity had been sown, shaping future generations' understanding of justice and moral duty. Derek often reflected on the events of that night, the lessons and the transformations they triggered. The city streets remained the same, but the culture around policing and community oversight had shifted noticeably. Briarfield County residents now attended oversight board meetings, observed traffic stops, and engaged with law enforcement in ways that had previously seemed impossible. Derek continued his surgical work, mentoring colleagues and shaping the next generation of doctors, emphasizing the importance of moral courage alongside technical skill. The Norwood Justice Initiative grew, expanding its reach into new communities, ensuring that those who had no voice could find representation and advocacy. Officer Moore's cadet program became a model for law enforcement training across the state, embedding lessons of accountability and ethical responsibility. Derek maintained personal routines that had become second nature: driving under the speed limit, classical music playing softly, hospital lanyard in the rearview mirror. Yet these habits were now symbols of resilience, vigilance, and a quiet assertion that injustice would not dictate his life. Reflecting on the past year, he recognized that courage in the face of adversity could produce systemic change. The town had been forced to confront its biases, law enforcement its limits, and the community its responsibilities. Derek's influence extended beyond surgery, beyond the courtroom, into the moral fabric of the county, reminding everyone that integrity, skill, and persistence could reshape the world quietly but profoundly. And through it all, Derek held fast to one principle: to save lives and uphold justice, even when confronted by those who sought to undermine it. The final chapter of Derek Norwood's story unfolded not in the glare of flashing lights or the chaos of the ER, but in the quiet affirmation of systemic change. 1 year after the events on Oak Ridge Road, Briarfield County had a new police chief, a functioning civilian oversight board, and a culture of accountability slowly taking root. Derek continued to save lives in the operating room, each surgery a testament to his skill, discipline, and unwavering commitment to duty. The Norwood Justice Initiative thrived, advocating for victims of racial profiling and effecting meaningful policy reforms. Officer Tonya Moore trained cadets on the real meaning of protect and serve, her program emphasizing ethical responsibility and empathy. Derek's personal habits remained: a measured pace on Oak Ridge Road, classical music softly playing, the hospital lanyard a constant reminder of vigilance and survival. Yet these routines had become symbols of resilience and integrity, illustrating that discipline and moral courage endure beyond a single incident. At home, over dinner with his daughter, he reflected on the journey and the lessons learned. When asked if he regretted moving to Briarfield, he simply said, "No. If I leave, they win. I survived to ensure that others will not be defined by the prejudices of the powerful." Patricia Holt made a full recovery, sending a private note of gratitude to Derek, their lives intertwined through a profound act of professional and moral courage. Derek's story became both inspiration and guide, a demonstration that even in the face of injustice, steadfast integrity, action, and commitment to others can reshape communities, influence institutions, and leave a lasting legacy. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and share this video.